Tomorrow is Labor Day, so it is a long weekend for many of us, which can be a much needed break. As school is back in session and the summer vacation months have wrapped up, we are all getting into new routines. Even if we do not go to a school or work at a school, we still have that dreaded school traffic. It's absolutely terrible. Things have changed and things keep changing. As stores begin to sell fall and Christmas items and decorations, things have certainly begun to feel different. If you don't feel different, walk into Hobby Lobby, things feel different. We are saying farewell to our summer vacations and hello to a busier season. Some of us are settling into new rhythms well, and others of us are having a hard time adjusting. That's okay. On top of all that, we have other tensions in our lives, things that others may just not know about us. Maybe it's a financial situation or grief, whether it's a new grief or an old grief that's revisited us. Maybe it's interpersonal conflict that's just not resolved yet. In addition to new rhythms and our own personal burdens, we face uncertainties even in our church, right? We are still developing ideas and practices, learning how to be and make disciples that make disciples, learning how to be a multi-ethnic space that reflects heaven's worship. And I'm sure that many of us are also dealing with mixed emotions about the Childers family leaving and moving on to a new season of their lives. I expect that we have a spectrum in the room. Those of us that are adjusting well right now, and those of us who feel like we're drowning. Either way, we all go through seasons where we aren't quite sure how to deal with the chaos. And that's what I want to talk about today. The passage of scripture that we're about to read is very near to my heart right now. I currently fall on the side of the spectrum where I've been feeling overtaken by anxieties in my life. And the Lord has been using this passage to encourage me and to remind me that I can trust God even when things feel out of control. So let me read all the verses at once to start, and then we'll look at it piece by piece. And you can follow along with me in the YouVersion app under the Events tab, or you can follow along on the screen, or in your own Bibles. We're looking at Psalm 46. It says this: God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth should change, though the mountains shake in the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble with its tumult. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of the city, it shall not be moved. God will help it when the morning dawns. The nations are in an uproar, the kingdoms totter, he utters his voice, the earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Come, behold the works of the Lord. See what desolations he has wrought on the earth. He makes war cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I am exalted among the nations. I am exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Recently, I was reading this book called Out of Chaos by Jessica LeBron. She is the chaplain at Asbury Seminary, so I got to know her well while I was there. She's an awesome person, and she's an even more incredible writer. And the premise of this book reminds us that at the very beginning, Genesis 1, before all of this was created, the earth was formless in a void space. Simply put, it was a wasteland. There was no order, no beauty, no purpose, no light, no sense of time. There was just chaos, something that the Hebrew writers of the Old Testament describe several times as the pre-creation state of existence. And yet, the Creator God brought all this, all that we have, out of chaos. The author, Jessica LeBron, says that on every page of the Bible, we see these same three actions being taken by God: order and chaos, filling emptiness, and lighting darkness. That is what God has been doing since page 1, and that is what the final pages of the Bible say will come in fullness. That is the ministry of Jesus, and that is the kingdom work that we are called to be a part of today. Ordering chaos, filling emptiness, and lighting darkness. But here's the thing. We know that chaos is still very much at work around us and even within us. Author Jessica LeGrone said that as an experiment, she went to her grocery stores, went shopping, and when she was out and about, she went up to people, just anyone she saw, and she asked them directly, "What is the chaos in your life?" You can imagine how surprised people were to be asked such a question. But in this experiment, she heard many people's hurts and anxieties. Even if they did not open up and tell her the details of their lives, they wore an expression on their faces that showed they were familiar with struggle. If I were to go up to you personally and ask you, "What's the chaos in your life?" you would first be a little shocked and uncomfortable that I asked you such a direct question. But I have a feeling that you too, just like me, we would have this knowing look, one that can't hide the fact that we have troubles and wars waging in our hearts. This psalm, Psalm 46, speaks to such chaos. It gives us comfort and hope. 3 times it says that God is with us. 3 times it says that God is our refuge, a place of safety. Our first step to take when we feel overwhelmed by chaos is to remind ourselves who God is. Let's read verse 1 again. It says, "God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble." Refuge. God is where we turn to for safety. Not God and something else, not God in a nice house, not God of money, not God and a good friend, not God and the wisdom of the world, not God and something else. God alone is who we should rely on for safety. Strength. God does not leave us to feel incapable or powerless in the face of chaos. God does not want us to walk through life beat down and discouraged. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7, we talked about it at youth the other night. It says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power, love, and self-discipline." We can be bold in the face of trouble, trials, and chaos because we know who God is and that the victory is already won. The past faithfulness of God and God's promises for our future bring us strength. A very present help. God is not only with us, but is actively at work in our lives. God does not just send us prayers and good vibes. You've seen that on Facebook. I'm sending you prayers and good vibes. And God doesn't just do that. God is working all things for our good. My parents used to tell me as a child, not all things are good, but God is working all things together for the good. God brings goodness out of chaos. How many times in Genesis chapter 1 did God pronounce his creation from chaos as good, and then a final time as very good? God is very present and is willing and able to help. The Hebrew words here are better translated as a well-proved help. This means that God has proven to be faithful and is powerful enough to bring salvation in any situation. We don't have any reason to doubt the Lord's ability to help us because of God's track record of being faithful. This brings us to our next couple verses in our second step. Our second step is to speak to that fear, remind fear that it is powerless. Verse 2, "Therefore, or because of all things we know about God, who we said God is, refuge, strength, very present, well-proved help. Therefore, because we believe all these things, we will not fear. Though the earth should change, though the mountains shake in the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble with its tumult. We will not fear, because we have known God to be our rescuer and our safety and our strength. We have no fear." There are a lot of those here, right? Though the earth should change, though the mountains shake in the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble with its tumult. So just imagine if we sat down and listed the worst possible scenarios. Are there any worriers in the room? Anybody who sits down and thinks about all the worst possible things that could happen? Yeah, I know that there are a few of us. There's actually this great exercise that I highly recommend, and it's modeled after what they call breath prayers, where you focus on your breathing and you recite biblical truths to yourself. The exercise is intended to give over your fear and to replace it with faith. In these moments of chaos, we need to remind ourselves, and we need to cause ourselves to say, even though blank, I will not fear. Recently, I've done this a lot, and I'll give you examples in a moment, but first I want to give you a little context. Many of you know that my husband Wesley has been in search of a job since we moved down here in May. And in Kentucky, we relied heavily on his income. He supported us financially as I went to school and as I pursued ministry. And when we left Kentucky, we knew that we were on the right path. We knew it. We just had to trust God to provide. But as May turned into June, and June into July, and now we stand in September, it has been hard to stay encouraged. We have had to choose faith. And daily I have to say to myself, I will not fear, though we lost our primary source of income. I will not fear, though I'm not sure how we will pay the bills this month. I will not fear, though we're getting close to that credit card limit. I will not fear, though these interviews never seem to get anywhere. I will not fear. And the truth is, I want to be afraid. Every inch of my body has been feeling the chaos at work. I even turned to telling my parents about all these raw feelings of anxiety and fear, and that's something I don't usually do. And many days I can feel myself just losing it on the inside. And it's hard, so very hard. But we have to choose to tell ourselves, I will not fear, even in the moments where it doesn't feel true. I've had to force myself to remember where God has been faithful in the past. I've had to try to remember the years where God provided the housing, the food, and the scholarships and the support when I needed them most. I've had to be patient. I'm not good at being patient. I'm not good at choosing confidence in my God when it's so much easier to give into chaos and just be afraid. I'm not good at saying, God, you are everything I need. Even though it's all falling apart, I will not fear. Even though we know that God is a well-proved help, when we have the stories and the memories to back it up, it's difficult not to be overcome by the chaos sometimes. We can know deep down that our God is a well-proved help and still have fears creep in. It is difficult to find our confidence in the Lord. There's a translation of verses 2 and 3 that I really like, and it's from the NLT. It says this: So we will not fear when earthquakes come and the mountains crumble into the sea. Let the oceans roar and foam. Let the mountains tremble as the waters surge. First it says when. When all falls into chaos, because we know it's not a matter of if trials and struggles come in this life. It's a matter of when. And then it says, let it happen. It's almost like a dare. Let chaos try to come and scare me. Let instability try to discourage me. Let the disappointment try to ruin my life. Let it happen. Because I won't be afraid. I'm not falling for it. I'm secure in the Father's hands. I know who I am. I know whose I am. Chaos has nothing compared to the power of my God. Let it happen. Let chaos try. Remind fear that it is powerless. So our first step in overcoming the chaos is to remember who God is. The second step is to remind fear that it is powerless. Our next step, step 3, is to find God amidst the chaos. God is at work bringing the peace of the kingdom. Verses 4 through 5 say this: There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of the city, it shall not be moved. God will help it when the morning dawns. This city that the author talks about is Jerusalem. The holy habitation is the temple. But it's interesting because there is no magnificent river that runs through Jerusalem. And for many cities at the time, that would be normal because you have to be supported by water. It makes sense. But there are just a few small streams in Jerusalem. The author is exaggerating here because it's not so much about a literal waterway as it is about a spiritual truth. The picture of the roaring and foaming sea in the previous verse is turned into a peaceful river of provision. This is a vision of God transforming chaos into something else, something good. And spiritually speaking, rivers are often a biblical image of or symbol of peace, rest, safety, and fulfillment. The city is made glad, and God is in the midst of it. It is immovable. It has the help of God. The morning is about to dawn, light is about to come to the darkness. According to the scriptures, we are now many temples of God. We carry God's presence with us. We are the holy habitation, and we are residents of the Holy Kingdom city. We can take this as assurance that God is turning our raging waters of chaos into calm streams of peace and provision. Though there is darkness and hopelessness and fear creeping in, we will be made glad in the end. We will be immovable. We will see God's help come, and we will see the morning break through the darkest of nights. God is at work, bringing the peace of the kingdom. Let's look at verses 6 through 9. The nations are in uproar, the kingdoms totter. He utters his voice, the earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us, the God of Jacob is our refuge. Come behold the works of the Lord, see what desolations he has brought on the earth. He makes wars to cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. So at the sound of just God's voice, everything changes. The earth was formed, the raging storm was calmed, and even now, chaos submits to the voice of God. Again, the psalmist says, the Lord of hosts is with us, the God of Jacob is our refuge. So what is the work of the Lord again? Ordering chaos, filling emptiness, and lighting darkness. Mighty acts of rescue, the downfall of oppression, the ceasing of wars. That is the future that we are all looking forward to, praying for, and hoping for. Isaiah 2:4 says this, the Lord will mediate between nations and will settle international disputes. They will hammer their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will no longer fight against nation, nor train for war anymore. Chaos between us will end. God will turn tools of death and destruction into tools that harvest life. Enemies will be transformed into neighbors. I want you to really pay attention to the wording used here. Desolations, cease, breaks, shatters, burns. These are strong words and strong efforts to take. The words denote violence and destruction. The psalmist is communicating that the Lord is essentially going to wage war on war. The heart of God is not that we fear each other or wish harm upon each other, take each other's lives. The heart of God is that we return to Eden, where we cared for creation and brought life instead of death, order instead of chaos. When we look for God at work, we see that God is bringing the peace of the kingdom. Things start to shift. Relationships begin to mend. Communities experience healing. We see the work of ordering chaos, filling emptiness, and lighting darkness. Yet we also acknowledge that we live in a tension that biblical scholars call the already not yet. The kingdom is already here, yet it is not quite here in its fullness as it will be when Jesus returns. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. There was this idea for a sermon series bumper video once. We've got our bumper videos, so you're familiar with what that may look like. And For this particular video, they were creating it for an Easter Sunday. So one of the biggest Sundays of the year for church, right? And when everybody walked in, this was the very first thing that they were supposed to see. People would come in, the video would play, there's nothing before it, no announcements, introductions, anything like that. It's just the video. And the video was supposed to show the hope of Jesus in our lives. That was the topic, hope of Jesus in our lives. So they thought, how can we show this in a video? Well, they thought that they would show death and destruction being reversed. So there were video clips of the Hindenburg blowing up, of guns being shot in wars, and other devastating acts. Then there was an image of Jesus on the cross, and then the closed tomb. And just when the video was at its most depressing, all the stage lights would come on, a bright light would shine behind the tombstone door, signifying Jesus' resurrection and victory over death. And then all the video clips would be played in reverse. So all the bullets would go back into guns, the Hindenburg would unexplode, devastation would be undone. And all that was wrong would be reversed. It was a brilliantly creative idea, yet it did not go so well in practice. You can imagine people as they walk into a packed church on Easter morning, and this is what they see. Parents shielded their children's eyes from such devastating clips of violence. Elderly folks gasped. People leaned over and whispered to one another. Even with the lights, the resurrection, the great reversal, the memory of pain and chaos was not undone. And that is the teaching we live in today. We know that Jesus was victorious over sin and death on the cross. We know that. We know that God will make all things right in the end. But we still live with the knowledge and experience of chaos on a daily basis. In chaos, we must remember the promises of God and the Lord's heart for our future. Not all things that happen are good, but God can transform all things into something good. That is the hope we must cling to today. God is at work bringing the peace of the kingdom. The last step, our fourth step, is to rest in God's peace and worship. Verse 10 says, "Be still and know that I am God. I am exalted among the nations. I am exalted in the earth." Be still. Be at rest. Do not strive. Do not fight. Do not fear. Be at peace. This can be taken one of two ways. The first is as God talking directly to us. We need God to remind us to be still, to trust, to choose faith and peace. We need to remember who God is, to know that God is indeed King of Kings and Lord of Lords. But it could be taken another way too. It can be understood as God speaking to the chaos. We also need God to speak that powerful, life-forming, storm-calming voice, to speak to the chaos, to tell it to be still, to proclaim that God is indeed an ever-present and well-proved help, all-powerful and unthreatened by any power on earth or in hell. And we need God to speak to our sickness, to our disease, to our cancer, to our disability. We need God to speak to our broken marriage. We need God to speak to our financial situation. We need God to speak to our addiction. We need God to speak to our depression and our anxiety. We need God to step in and say, "Be still, raging waters. I am God." And when God speaks, we listen. We worship. We thank God for being who God is. We thank God for past acts of faithfulness. We thank God for silencing our fear. We thank God for transforming chaos into something good. We thank God for the peace that is yet to come in our world and the peace that we can have right here and now. We just worship because we know Jesus, who is Christ the King and worthy of being exalted. There's one last line in verse 11. For the third time we find the reminder, "The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge." So we are encouraged to effectively repeat the process of remembering who God is, even in the chaos. We may forget, but that's okay. We remind each other through the times that we meet together and through the songs we sing. We encourage each other with prayers and sincere conversations. We remember together. We reject fear together. We remind fear that it is powerless. We turn our eyes on Jesus together. Help each other find God at work amidst the chaos. We remember that He's bringing the peace of the kingdom. We wait in hopeful expectation together. And we sit in the stillness and rest in God's peace and worship together. So please stand and worship with me as we close.